I want to bring in Dr. David Puder to talk first, and he'll be here through the whole entire episode. But this is a man, we've had him on Walk-ins Welcome before. He's absolutely brilliant, and I'm really excited that you get to become aware of him if you're not. This is someone that I think has a very balanced perspective on what is and isn't therapy. Welcome to Real America, Dr. Puder.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be with you.
What it's there's a lot to cover. What first of all, before we even get into it, I want people to have some kind of practical advice for how you would even screen for a therapist. How do you find a good therapist?
I
They
think you probably
exist, right?
I think you probably start by asking friends, doctors, people who might have an inside scoop, who are the people around me that are therapists that have good reputation, and maybe you ask everyone and then write down that list. Problem is most people are too maybe anxious to ask around. Um, so it can be hard. It can be hard to find a good therapist.
I mean, yeah, a lot of the time people will just, one of the kind of standard things I've noticed and heard is that you just never get a call back because therapists are so bombarded. And so oftentimes, if they don't have any space on their calendar, they just won't even call someone back. So you'll call dozens and dozens of therapists and not even get one single return call, which seems crazy in this industry, by the way.
That seems awful. It's really tough. Or a lot of insurance companies will list therapists as
Hmm.
if they are credentialed with that therapist, and they are not, And so maybe they were like decades ago, but then the insurance companies don't take them off. So you could be calling, down the list of your insurance company, and no one's going to reply if they're not accepting that insurance, if that's how you lead. So
Right.
I I think what I would say is when you call, you know, you're you're just meeting this person, be polite, you know, try to set up an initial appointment, and then try to get you know, your initial impression and kind of a gut feeling. Don't just go with the first therapist that you meet. Um, consider it like you're meeting a stranger, and do you connect with this person? Do they listen well? Are they kind of projecting their own ideas on you? Are they asking you really strange questions? Can they tell when maybe you don't want to answer a question, or are they reading your nonverbal cues? Like, are they listening well? And we can get more into this. I think one of the things I wanted to introduce to your audience is this idea of reflective function. And so when we think about what are the best therapists, they're high in this ability to introspect on their own life, actually. But that's like really hard. Like, you can't just tell that from the get-go.
Right.
Um, so, how well are they at receiving feedback? How well are they at hearing from you when you disagree with them? These might give you clues into their reflective function. Okay.
Mm.
Yeah,
What did you think? Did you see the Naomi Best? Did you read the Wall Street Journal piece?
I did. And I was very surprised. So, for those of you who haven't read it, who are listening in, basically in this program she was in, they were asking the students to write like very extensive sexual, you know, ex from the first sexual experience all the way forward to today. It's like, really? I'm going to turn that into my teacher who, like, I don't have like a relationship with this person. This person isn't someone that I've met with one on one. They're not in a professional relationship with me. I mean, even with my patients, like, I would not expect them to tell me all of that, you know, like, ever. Like, it's up
Yeah.
to them how much they want to share. And I would expect them to want to build a trusting relationship for maybe 6 months to a year before they start to share things that are very vulnerable. And
Yeah.
so when I when I read that, I was like, oh, what? And then she also talks about how they watching like sadomasochistic stuff, and then the teacher was kind of giving some off jokes, and yeah, it's bizarre.
By the way, it wasn't even just writing the, entire sexual history from when you first masturbated to whatever you ever did. It was also uploading loading it to like a third party server. It wasn't even like turn this in to your teacher, which in and of itself is crazy. To me, uploading all that information, like everything's been hacked,
Yeah.
everything. Who that seems crazy to me too. I don't know how one trains for this because, of course, you have to be comfortable with all kinds of things that would be considered kinks or whatever the terminology is in your field. So, how do you, generally would you train for that?
And this is where it's kind of complicated because you want to talk to students about sexual things. They're going to feel uncomfortable. Um, but I don't necessarily, I never elicited from any of the people, any of my students, like, tell me your stories. Uh, in particular, like that's so usually how we go about training is a combination of didactics, supervision, and then your own personal therapy. And I think that it's weird to require personal therapy because I feel like it has to be voluntary
Hmm.
because, and I would say the only place that is not voluntary is more of like a psychoanalytic school. If you want to be a psychoanalyst, you have to go through and be analyzed yourself. Like that's part of what you're signing up for. Um, so I think a lot of that would best be taken processed one on one with the supervisor as you have clients that bring it forward, because our clients do talk to us about sexuality all the time. Um,
Yeah,
and go ahead.
no, go on. It reminds me a lot of in 12 step there's fourth step inventory that you take, and it's like everything you resent and everyone you resent, and there's a lot of controversy around how you often go through this with a sponsor, or you can go through it with someone you trust, like a therapist for instance. But I had a great sponsor when I went through this because we would hit something where it was, it's usually it ends up like the end is looking at what your part is. The reason this is controversial is when there's something like, for example, sexual assault or abuse. Or you've been molested as a kid. That's not your fault. Your part would be looking at like, how is this perpetuated in your life? But I would get to these things, and I had a great sponsor who was like, above my pay grade, take that to a therapist. Like when we would hit trauma, she was smart enough to know that this was something I had to go work on with a therapist. And also, she was like, I'm just a random person in a room, of
Hmm.
AA, like that. She didn't necessarily want to know all this stuff. So it is bizarre to me that you would, as a teacher, be asking for these like, I mean, and we're talking about something where you're trying to recover and you do a
Yeah.
whole like sex inventory in
Yeah.
recovery. But I never took that to just like a stranger. I can imagine being very uncomfortable and vulnerable. But then according to her today, many of the students came out and said that they didn't feel that anything that they were asked to do was out of the ordinary, and the way
Mhm.
that she's kind of presented it is not accurate.
Well, time will tell, right? And I'm sure there's another side of a story, as there always is. And that's part, and I can almost like see what the faculty would say, in
Yeah.
my mind, because I've been faculty, and it's like, hey, we're training you, and most patients talk about sexual things. Like you need to become comfortable talking about sexual things. Um, and I think the problem is that training programs are trying to get 100 people through a year rather than like, hey, there's an individual here who maybe when they have trauma, it's like dissociating and actually traumatizing to talk to a wall of like a still face.
Yeah.
So, like, for example, a lot of kids will tell me, or a lot of adults will tell me when they told their parents about some sexual trauma, their parents either got angry at them or they just went completely flat and didn't say anything and never talked about it again. So imagine you've gone through something traumatic. You want to talk to someone who is able to empathize, listen, help you think about it in new ways, reduce your internal guilt. That's one of the
Hmm.
biggest things about trauma therapy. And is if you still feel guilty about this thing, it's going to be really hard for your brain to resolve it. So something called cognitive processing therapy really attacks the guilt over and over again.
Mm. Do you think your one thing that I do agree with her, and I think a lot of people are trying to move the goalposts a little bit from the point that she's making in her essay with a lot of the other things that she was asked to do. And I witnessed even watching my husband go through his master's program. There has been ideological capture of this institution, along with a lot of you know, the like all the the licensing boards and whatnot. What is your feeling on this?
You know, I think that um
Can
there's
you
an
even be honest about it?
you know, I think that there's um people who have been very hurt by different um situations. Okay, let me think about how to be honest about it while still, you know,
Not losing your
well,
license.
well, here's the thing
The
is like
irony.
the there could be extremes on both sides. And I would and it leads to a more difficult conversation, which is around reflective function and nuance. Okay. So if I have someone come in and they feel like I've had patients who feel like the system is rigged against them, and sometimes it is. And
Hmm.
sometimes I've had patients who come in who have more of their personality is organized around some degree of paranoia that the system is against them. And so sometimes it's like, how do I tease out what is truth and what is not truth? And I think the problem that I see is a lot of times we just put these blanket solutions on things like, oh, your partner is a narcissist. And that's actually a very low reflective function thing to say as a therapist. And so, um, what we want to do is we want to increase the reflectiveness and expansiveness and think about the multiplicity of influences that are leading to a situation happening. And anytime we have very monolithic, easy to say tribal solutions, we're probably wrong.
It's interesting too because there seems to be, I think women get the benefit of therapy. There, you look in your field, it's predominantly female. There, women generally, not to just throw everyone into categories, but we speak in kind of feelings. Why we're always in the bathrooms talking about, what are we doing in the bathroom? We're pumping each other up and telling each other to get out there and tell him to fuck off or whatever. Like, I think women are better at talking about their feelings, expressing them, and men. The reason I even wanted to do this episode this week was last week a man was saying that he had kind of poo-pooed therapy and now he's realizing like he was like maybe the minivan isn't so bad. Maybe I should look into therapy to get over some of this unresolved stuff I have from my being a child of multiple divorces. And I feel like men in particular, then you have kind of on a lot of the, I mean, I hate to say right wing, but it's often usually coming from the right wing where they're like, therapy is bullshit. It's a stupid waste of time. And there still seems to be a stigma that it particularly gets applied to men when they want to seek therapy. And then you are added to that with it being captured ideologically by people who maybe haven't even lived that much life. They're going right from, their like whatever their kind of ideology was in college directly into therapy. And also we see this kind of split politically in male and female. How how do we help the men? That's my long way of asking. What are your thoughts on that, and how are the men doing? And weirdly,
Men,
the women aren't doing well either, based on all the numbers I read at the top of this episode.
yeah, I mean, a lot of people are not going to good therapy or therapy, period.
Is
Um,
right. That's my question. Is it even therapy?
a lot of therapy. I mean, I just posted the other day, how much in your training did you get trained on things like transference, countertransference, different personality types. And one person was like, all we got trained on is CBT. And I had a patient come in today and he said, hey, yeah, I've been to a couple therapists and all they do is teach me how to breathe when I'm anxious.
Mm,
And I'm like thinking to myself, okay, so he really hasn't done much therapy. Like he's been given one coping skill over and over by a bunch of therapists that's very easy to teach. It's so yeah, there's a lot of nuance. And okay, men, how are men doing? Men are not doing well. They're four times more likely to end their life. And I have patients, male and female, whose fathers ended up ending their life, and it is catastrophic. It is awful. There's a ripple effect that is just so painful. Um, but I want to get away, is it only men or is it people with a more avoidant attachment style? Because I think people who avoid connectedness or connection or vulnerability, because it's safer, maybe because early on in their life, it was safer to be a little bit more like distant. Those are people who will avoid therapy, but maybe need it the most. And a lot of them have very complex trauma and a lot of work to do. And so I see this, I have female clients who it's like the first session, you can tell like they did not come here easily. It took the family sometimes a couple years to get them into treatment, And so there's a large avoidance of looking at our inner world. And a lot of people do a lot of things to try to avoid sitting in the painful stuff